G'day, it's Prezzo here, back in the shop today, and this is part 3 of how to build a DIY sand muller. A sand muller is something you'd be interested in doing if you were doing any sort of metal casting in the home shop. Its purpose is to condition and prepare the sand for a sand mould, and it does that by rolling the sand underneath this very heavy steel roller, and also turning and manipulating the sand so you can incorporate water, or the correct ratio of water, into the mix. Now, in today's episode we're going to look at finishing off the sand mixing drum. At the moment the base of the drum is made from 19mm thick form ply, which is quite a hard, dense plywood with a protective coating on it, and we're going to skin that in aluminium and add a skirt on the side to contain the sand. Now, a lot of people have been interested in this and asking about it. I'll just warn you now, this is going to be decidedly low tech. It doesn't require a lot of special tools or equipment. In fact, I'm making all of this section of the build out of scrap. In fact, the only thing you might use that makes it easier is a jeweler's roll. But if you don't have one of those, you could use a large diameter pipe or a propane cylinder to form the aluminium around before it gets screwed onto the side of this plywood disc. So let's not faff about, let's get stuck in, and we'll look at the first step, which is preparing the material to go on this base. Okay, let's talk about materials for the base of this mixing drum. Now, I know this is going to be controversial, but let's go anyway. Now, this is what I've got. This is 3mm thick aluminium sheet with an anodized coating on it. Now, I know it's not big enough to do the whole job, but it's what I've got, and I was able to get this for free, and I've got lots of it, so I don't really have a problem with using it. Another way of looking at this is that if I can't buy something online, I couldn't be bothered going looking for it. The area where I live is basically a tourist area, and we don't have a lot of industry. So getting hold of half a sheet of aluminium in one piece is going to be difficult, or almost impossible, unless I drive 100 kilometres to get it. So what I'm going to do here is I'll mark out a circle on this, the same size as the base of my drum. I'll cut this up on the bandsaw, and then we're going to glue each piece down using a polyurethane glue, and with pressure we can bond this quite strongly to the base of that drum. Okay, for the sides of the drum we're going to be using this. This is 1.5mm thick aluminium. Once again, it's scrap. It was given to me for nothing. It was at one point an advertising sign. It was covered in paint. I stripped that off with a chemical stripper and a pressure washer, and I've just sanded that to get the last of it off there and sort of give it a reasonable sort of texture. Added bonus, it already had holes in the edge of it, so I'm going to be using these to screw this to the plywood. Alright, not too bothered about where those joints appear. I've already got some reference marks on here so I can put this all back in the same position where it is now. Okay, let's get this roughly cut out. Just for doing the rough cutting, I'm going to be using one of these carbide tooth saw blades in the angle grinder. Bought this years ago and it just sat in the drawer, and I was terrified to use it. I just had visions of this thing running amok and cutting its way through everything with me not being able to control it. But surprisingly, it is quite easy to control. Just want to get most of the waste off that, and I'll do the rest on the bandsaw. And this is why I needed to finish off my metal cutting bandsaw. I knew I had this job coming up and I just couldn't bear the thought of doing it with a hacksaw or a jigsaw or some other method. So yeah, that makes it a bit easier. Look at that, all covered in man glitter. That's going to drive the wife insane. Okay, before I can think about bonding this aluminium sheet to this piece of ply, I'm going to roughen up this surface a bit. This is sort of a non-stick coating they put on this so it won't bond to concrete when it's used as formwork. So I'm guessing that I'm going to have the same problem if I try and use any sort of glue on this. It's going to try and repel the glue. So I'm just going to put a bit of tooth on this and then we'll bond the first piece on. Alright, this is an old handsaw, so don't get upset. Okay, let's roughen up that surface considerably now so the glue that I'm going to use will have a good chance of bonding to that. Now, the stuff that I've got is Sikaflex multi-purpose adhesive. This is a high strength polyurethane formula, it says, right there. And I better read the instructions, but basically we're going to do one panel at a time and clamp it down and then trim off the edge. Yeah, that's all we got to do. Just sanded the back of that just to get, you know, sort of a keyed surface on that as well. I'm just going to clean this with some methylated spirits. Read the instructions. Seems pretty straightforward. The only problem is it says a 36-hour cure time, but I'm guessing that I can take the clamps off after it's been sitting overnight and glue the next bit down. So it's going to take about 2 or 3 days to get all these pieces on. Alrighty, so I'm going to spread the glue on here and then we're just going to bond that down and just rinse and repeat to get the other 2 pieces done. Now if it looks like I don't know what I'm doing here, you're probably right. I'm certainly winging it. I've never done this before. I'm going to take the view that too much is better than not enough. That's interesting, it's got a tendency to slide as you put in the pressure of the clamp on. Okay, I think I got that right. So I'll put some smaller clamps on here and some blocks to try and keep all that compressed really well. And I've got to clean up this back edge and my fingers. Should have worn gloves, shouldn't I? You idiot. Well, you can see I've got 3 more clamps on there, another big thick block, and I'm pretty sure that's held down well. The instructions say to use mineral turpentine to do the cleanup. And you can see here I've got quite a lot of glue. on that surface there where the next sheet will go. So I want to make sure that that's really clean and there's no glue residue along there. Well, that's great, just smears everywhere. Wait, I'll be back. It's alright, I'll use the inch side, I never use that. Of course, the really fun part's going to be doing the middle sheet. It'll be hard to get clamps in all the way to the centre, or any sort of clamping force in the centre. Alright, that's cleaned up pretty well there. What I'll do is I'll leave the bits hanging out at the edge there and I can check them to see how well they're cured. I'm guessing that we can add the other panel after, say, I don't know, like 12 hours or so. I don't think I want to be mulling any sand in this until it's had a good week to cure, but we can certainly stack the other panels on there. So we'll check that in the morning, see how it looks. While that first piece is bonding there, I thought I'd have a go at rolling up the edge of the mixing drum. This is a jeweler's roll that I made years ago. It's to a design by George Thomas, who was one of those legendary model engineers that published a lot of his own designs over the years, and this is one that I made. I had to change it a bit to suit the materials that I had, but it's a geared jeweler's roll where the top and bottom roll is geared together, and there's an adjustable slip roller at the back there to give you the radius that you need. These wheels here control the amount of pinch on the top and bottom roller to feed the material through. And the strip of material that I've got, like I said, it's 1.5 millimeters thick, and I needed a piece that was roughly 2.3 meters long, which surprised me. I thought, oh, it's a 720 diameter circle, it can't be that much, but luckily the sheet that I cut this from was 2.4 meters, so I'm going to have a little bit extra left over, but I can trim it after I start fitting it to that plywood disc. So I'll run this through one pass. It's going to get a bit unwieldy, but we'll see how we go. That is curving it, but not a lot. I think I'll bring it back and wind a bit more curve on that. Otherwise it's just going to feed through and become difficult to handle. Alright, same again. That's going to kink if I don't wind a bit more curve on that. Now that's probably too much, but that's okay, I can spring that open. Alright, it's going to get interesting. You know what, that looks way too big. I think I miscalculated something. But it doesn't matter, I can put that around that plywood disc there and mark off the joint line, cut it, and then I'm going to get my friend to TIG weld the joint. I was sure I calculated that properly. It's 2 pi r, right? 720 diameter, worked out 2.3 meters. I was never any good at maths. Well, it's the next day and this stuff seems to be set pretty well. It's gone quite rubbery I believe this stuff sticks like you know what to a blanket, so I don't have any issues with this coming loose later. So what we'll do is we'll take off these clamps and we'll add the next piece. Alrighty, so we'll get the next bit on. I won't show you the last one as it's going to be the same as the first one, but this one should be interesting. One thing you've got to be careful of here is that none of this glue that's squeezed out is going to stop the other sheet from butting up really tightly against the first joint line. So I'm just trimming all of this. So what I want to avoid is getting any sort of gap between the two aluminium sheets, because that's where sand's going to lodge in there and it's just going to make it hard to clean the drum. So I'll get all that really cleaned out and then we'll look at how we're going to clamp down the other sheet. Just spreading the glue on the sheet for the middle section, the same as I did yesterday. And you can see I've already sanded this and cleaned it with methylated spirits just to remove any residue of metal dust that might be there. Probably the only important thing here is get the glue right out to the very edge of the sheet. That's why I hate wearing these stinker things. These are shown on the box as being large, and yet I still struggle to get them on, and they pinch all the hair on the back of your hands. I just hate them. Okay, here's how this is going to work. So what I've got in here, this is just one of those workmates. I've got a large piece of 50mm square tube. In one end I've cut a slot. The board that we're going to clamp goes on top of that. We're going to put our sheet of glued aluminium on top, and then we're going to clamp that down with a single piece of wood. Where is it? So what we're going to do is we're going to put this cup head bolt into that slot there. And I've already adjusted this so that when we put the clamp on the other end, it's going to spread the pressure of the clamping force evenly over that surface there. So the problem is I don't have any clamps that can reach far enough in to put pressure in the center of this piece. So this heavy section of wood is going to do that job for me. So let's get the piece of material on there. These nails are just to ensure that this sheet doesn't want to slip away and leave a gap just here. I'll pull these nails later. So the next thing we'll do is put some newspaper down here just so there's no chance that we're going to glue our clamping panel to that sheet of aluminium. This is a large piece of kitchen benchtop scrap. I'm just going to use this as a caul. A caul is just a way of applying pressure evenly over a large surface. So now we can put this clamping board in place with that cup head bolt engaging in that slot. And it sort of acts like a giant toolmaker's clamp. So we can put pressure on this end now, squeeze that down, and if you adjust the two ends correctly, you're sort of getting an even pressure. The newspaper also helps to create a sort of a resilient surface to take up any sort of irregularities in that gap that might be created between the aluminium sheet and this part here. Okay, so I'm going to just let that set overnight again, and I think we're going to be good. Okay, it's the next day and I'll take this apart, and I'll just address this now. Some people are probably thinking, why didn't you just use two clamps, put another clamp over here? And yes, you could do that, that would work. It's just that I made this rig for another job. I had a large table and there was a bubble in the veneer right in the center of the table, and I needed to put spot pressure on that one location. And because there was a block underneath here, when you put the first clamp on, it would sort of have to balance. You put the second clamp on, the first one would fall off, and it was just a nuisance. So I made this rig, and it meant that you just slide that piece of timber in and tighten up one clamp and it's done. So that was the reason. I was just sitting there in the corner and I figured I'd use it. And you can see why I put the newspaper on there. A little bit of that glue seeped out of that joint. But that's pretty good. I mean, it's not dead flat, but it doesn't have to be. It's important that this doesn't delaminate the actual surface flatness. It's not that big a deal. Okay, I'm going to get this trimmed up, put the other piece on, and then we're going to come back for the exciting part, which is when we make this edge truly circular and trim off all the overhanging aluminium. That's going to be fun. I've let that polyurethane to fully bond now. It's had about 2 or 3 days to cure. It seems to have held that down really well. And I did say that I thought this was an anodized aluminium sheet, and now I'm not so sure. I think it's probably just some sort of a chromated coating or a phosphated coating. It doesn't seem hard enough. It scratches very easily, but that's what I got. Now, the next step is to trim this outer edge and make that as circular as I can get it. At the moment, it's just sort of rough cut. And look, I badly wanted to be able to use the rotation of the sand Muller mechanism and then hold some sort of a cutting tool against that edge and have that trim that edge for me. However, it was a high-risk strategy, and the failure mode was always going to be spectacular. So I've taken a much more pragmatic approach. So that's going to allow me to rotate an arm from this center hole. So let's have a look at that. And boom, there it is. So this is just a piece of plywood. It's been screwed down at the base of my Makita router. I've got a 12mm cutter, straight cutter, and I've got a disc of plywood held in a slot so that I can adjust the radius of this whole arm. And the notion is that we're going to clamp the circular disc down, set the cutter up so it's just cutting, and we'll go all the way around and then come back, just gradually reduce the radius until we've got this trimming that plywood and aluminium disc accurately. So let's give that a go. Just sort of move that arm in to get the initial cut started, and then we'll do a full pass and just keep doing that. You can sort of see where that cut started, and it's progressed that way. So I got about 1 millimeter of the aluminium to come off, and then we'll start to hit the plywood. That's going to be our second pass. If that goes all the way around like that, I'll be very happy. Okay, well, that edge is all cleaned up now, so the next step is to clean my lens filter, obviously. That's better. Start to drill these 8mm holes through the aluminium skin on the other side and then countersink those for the screws. You see what I mean about this stuff getting all scratched up? So I want those screw heads to be just slightly below the surface, a little bit more than that. It's about right. Okay, that's done. Okay, there's the sides of the drum just sort of loosely held in position, and I actually solved the mystery of why this material appeared to be too long. When I asked my friend to measure this sheet of aluminium, he told me it was 2.4 meters. I just checked, it's actually 3 meters plus 30 millimeters. So I was under the assumption that it was close to the size that I wanted. Anyway, that's a good thing, we got too much. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim this edge here close to its finished dimension, and then we'll start screwing the aluminium sides onto the base disc, and then I can accurately cut that and get it welded. So I'm just going to clamp that, got a bit of extra there. I'll get that cut and then we can start putting some screws around the base. Screws that I'm using, they're timber screws, wood screws. They're a button head, 20mm long with a Phillips drive. So this will give me enough strength around the edge of that disc there. Okay, cock that up there. I'm hoping I got just enough extra trim off that. Okay, I'm going to start here. Remember, this row of holes was already there in the material when I got it. And it's a bit close to the bottom, but I think it'll be okay. I'm going to pre-drill for the screws just to be sure. And we'll just work our way around and then we can work out our overlap. Just using this block of plastic here to allow me to push the aluminium sheet hard against the edge of the disc when I drill that hole. Well, there are the sides on now, and there's about 10mm extra here to be trimmed off, and then I'm going to get my friend to TIG weld that together for me. Then the whole thing can go back on. This edge at the top here is still quite sharp from where it was cut with that carbide tip saw, so that's going to need to be trimmed down and leveled and smoothed over. The sides of that are quite rigid. It's turned out good given how thin this is, so I'm quite happy with that. When I do trim this, I'm going to do it on the Muller, so that's going to get exciting. Alrighty, let's get this all buttoned up. Well, as you can see, I got this TIG welded up yesterday. The distortion caused by the welding has made this top edge a bit wibbly wobbly, but we're going to address that in two different ways. Okay, hold my beer and watch this. Let's make the top of that relatively flat. It's not perfect, it's pretty close. Now we've still got the issue of the run out in that edge, and we're going to deal with that in a different way. Okay, here's the plan. I was given a length of this aluminium extrusion. I'm not sure what it was used for, but apart from this slot around the top here, it's almost perfect. I took this to a place where I used to work and I got it rolled close to the correct radius. It's a little bit open so that when I get to the joint on the other side there, I can trim that so it's a nice neat fit. And I'm hoping that this will hold the top of the drum in tension and keep it relatively circular. So I'll get that pop riveted on and give it a bit of a clean up, and the drum is nearly done. Just tidied up that joint there and dressed that a bit with a file, a bit of Scotch-Brite. So let's plug her in, see how close we got. Still running out a bit. I reckon I can sort of push and pull that and get it a bit closer. But even if I don't, this is going to do the job. Yeah, I'm happy. Most important thing now though is that that's really rigid on that edge. Even if you bump that with, a piece of machinery or a piece of equipment while you're using it, it's going to be fine. So in terms of strength, that's fine. Not sure what I'll do with that gap on top there yet. Could be a candidate for filling that with epoxy, and I'll probably paint the outside of the drum. Am I overdoing it? Yeah, probably. But I want it to look nice. Well, guess what, boys and girls? I've just discovered a major design flaw. This arm is not going to go down into the drum without fouling on that edge there. So that's what you get for not modelling the whole thing in CAD before you start, or making decisions on the run. I think I decided to make these sides a bit higher than what I originally planned, and that's the problem. Anyway, it's an easy fix. I'm just going to have to cut that arm there and put a bit of a dog leg in that to clear that side. That'll work. That's going to come out okay. Alright, I'm going to leave the video here now as I'm pretty sure I'm over my half-hour limit. I would have loved to show you this thing running with the roller and the sand in it and all that sort of stuff, but I've just run out of time. So when we come back in the next video, I guarantee you that's going to be the last one. We're going to attach the plows. Now the plows are the things that direct the sand underneath the full width of that roller there. I've already got sort of partly made up. And one other announcement, I've taken the decision to never ever put any music on any of my videos again. Honestly, it would be less controversial to talk about religion or politics. It seems that that's one of those really divisive issues that some people like, some people hate. So as I wind this video up, I'm going to invite you to, and I'll check you on the next video. Thanks for watching.